Thank you for your patience. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Stephen Shore.
All right, we're almost there. And here we go. All right, it's great to see so many people here who are interested and dedicated to helping autistic people like us lead fulfilling and productive lives, and in particular the employment piece. So I guess the first order of the day is to see if everybody can hear me.
Barely.
Barely, okay, I think we need the tech person back.
No,
Yes.
Yeah. So let's see how that works. Yeah, keep it going. All right, so back to our regularly scheduled broadcasting. We're looking at opening doors to employment. And employment is a vital thing to look at, mainly because everybody's got to work for a living, unless you win the lottery. And then secondly, we have this massive under and unemployment rate of autistic individuals. And that rate, it depends on who you ask. Some people combine that rate at 85%, others say it's 88%. So it's suffice to say that only 12 to 15% of us are working to our capacity. And you know, if you want to talk about autism and national emergencies, that's an emergency that we need to address the issue of employment. And what can we do to address those issues of employment, and while at the same time being mindful of the strengths and the abilities, and asking the question, what can a person on the autism spectrum do? And what that requires is understanding the characteristics of autistic individuals. So let's take a look at one of them. And one of those characteristics has to do with focusing on details. So let's do that. Let's take a look at these two pictures. And who can tell me some of the differences? It's the old game of what's the difference between the picture on the top and the picture on the bottom. And we've got one right from the front here. So what do you got?
Oh, well, on the floors, there's something on the bottom picture. It looks like a button or something. But on the top picture, there's nothing there.
No, kind of like over here.
Yep.
Yeah, somebody dropped a quarter or a button or something. All right, there's 12 more to go. You've got one.
On the base of all the horses,
Yeah.
they have those beige, I don't know, cone looking.
Well, these yellow
One is
things.
missing, and one is right, one is
It's missing down here, but it's at the top. All right, so there's another one. You got one.
In the second set of poles, there is the second, one of the poles in the middle is removed.
Oh, and the second set of poles.
The sixth pole below is removed.
All right, so there's a missing pole. All right, yeah, there definitely is. All right, there are only 9 more left. I see Amy over there desperately looking for one. You got one.
There's, on the top picture, the horse on the right has a red eye cover and it's blue on the bottom.
Oh, this bridle type thing. Whatever it is, it's
Yeah.
red on the top and it's blue on the bottom.
Yeah.
And you got another one.
Yeah. Round thing on the bottom of one of the poles is gone and the support stand over there.
All right, so there's something missing on the bottom. There's a long step from down here all the way up to the top. And there's a little step over here, so that's one. And we got one over here.
It looks like the horses, the zebras, there's like one less stripe and its rear leg.
Oh yeah, look at that. Look at all this white here.
Yeah.
All right, well, here's the rest of it. So if we consider what we were looking at, what was it anyways?
A zebra.
Carousel. Carousel, yeah. It's carousel, it's a merry-go-round. What animal was in the foreground?
Zebra, horse.
Zebra, horses, or one or the other. So what would you say? Zebra. What color is the animal behind the first one? Tan. And how many animals are in the row closest to us? These are hard questions to answer. And the reason why they're hard to answer is because I forced all of you to perceive these pictures the way we perceive our environment. We focus on details. And that's right. Yeah, we focus on details, and often at the expense of the whole picture. And that's the central coherence thing that you sometimes hear people talking about. That autistic people lack central coherence, getting the big picture, seeing the proverbial forest for the trees. But if we consider this characteristic, focusing on details, are there times when it's advantageous to be focused on those details? What are some situations where it's good to be detail-oriented?
If you have to work on footnotes in an essay.
Okay, footnotes in an essay. You have to be very detailed.
Graphic design.
Graphic design.
Painting a portrait.
Painting a portrait.
Editing.
Editing.
Math.
Mathematics.
Science in general too.
All right, science in general.
Watch repair.
Say that again?
Watch repair.
Oh, watch repair, yeah, fixing these guys.
And cinematography.
Cinematography, the lady over here.
I was gonna say probably.
He stole my answer. Okay. Answer, please.
Movies, animation, I guess.
All right, movies, animation. So these are just some of the areas. Often we think about IT as well. And in these situations, it's important to be focused on details. It might be possible to say that a non-autistic person might be lacking in detail-oriented thinking in such a situation. So we could say that. And the idea is that we can take any of these characteristics that are often referred to as deficits. We so often hear deficits in communication, deficits in social interaction, central coherence, all kinds of other things, but we can flip them around and they can actually become strengths. And that's how we need to take a look at those of us on the autism spectrum. So, what am I good at? People often ask me. Or, what is my autistic child, student, whoever I am supporting, good at? How do we find out? And my question to that question, I answer that question with a question, and that is, how do they spend most of their time? Or would spend most of their time if you let them do it? How would you spend most of your time if you could? And what that suggests is where we desire to spend most of our time are areas that we're good at. Those are areas of interest. And those can be matched to vocational and avocational possibilities. And what that requires is reframing those characteristics. Instead of looking at them as deficits, let's just look at them as differences. And the question is, how can we use those differences? So my question is, what I'm looking at are the abilities. What are the abilities of the individual? What are the interests? What kind of mind does that person have? What kind of mind? Processing styles, learning styles. What is the learning style of autistic people? Visual.
Largely real-life application instead of just learning facts.
Okay, so real-life amplification.
Hands-on. For me, it's hands-on experience.
Hi, I'm glad you said that. And your name is?
Michaela.
Michaela said hands-on. She didn't say visual. And that's really important that you said that. Because for a while it was thought that autistic people were all visual. We were visual thinkers. And I think most of us are. But the key word, and there are, just like anybody else, we see a diversity of learning styles. So for Michaela, it appears to be kinesthetics. You gotta kind of do it, in order to learn. And I see a hand up over here.
So why does Temple Grandin say all individuals with autism are visual? I actually wondered about it when I was reading it.
Well, there's two things to keep in mind about that statement by Temple Grandin. One was that because Temple Grandin is so visual, she thought everybody was visual. But then she started interviewing people and talking to people about their learning styles. And she made people like Michaela who would say, well, I learn better by doing, or I learn better by hearing. And then Temple realized that not everybody is visual. So she doesn't say it anymore. So if you see a current presentation of hers, you'll see that she doesn't do that. But she did originally in her book. She said we were all visual. And most of us are. I think most people are visual in general. But there are the other learning styles. Yeah.
I know that for me, let's say, I don't do well learning it as part of a group together. Like, I work, like if I do one-on-one, it's a lot more effective for me than doing it as part of a larger group.
Right. So different styles. But what we can say is, perhaps a better statement would be that to say that our processing style, while it tends to be visual, maybe something else, and whatever that is, it's probably going to be to an extreme. So those of us who are visually based, we're extremely visually based. Those of us who are kinesthetically based, we tend to be extremely kinesthetically based. And by looking at autism as a study of extremes, that also can be helpful. And what that suggests is that the stuff we're good at, we're incredibly good at. But the stuff we find challenging, that's going to be a big challenge. And that's especially important to keep in mind when it comes to employment. And just like everybody else, we need to be employed according to our strengths. So how many people do you know who have built a career out of remediated weaknesses?
What does that sentence mean? I don't understand.
All right, so what that means is, I'm going back to the bad old days of school. And when we think about school, we often see autistic people and others with differences given these labels. These are very common labels. Those of us on the autism spectrum have probably heard them about ourselves. They're awful labels. Might it be possible to reframe them as something like that? And what I see happening so often in schools is that there's a heck of a lot of time spent on doing things that we're bad at, and often at the expense of the things we're good at. So we say, for example, well, Jason's really good at math. So maybe he doesn't need to go to math, but let's spend more time doing something else, like penmanship. And then maybe he'll get better at penmanship. But as we know, there are bioneurological reasons, physiological reasons, why this doesn't work for many of us. And no matter how much OT and how much physical therapy and whatnot we do by engaging in this, it will take us to some point. But for many of us, this is not going to be a primary means of taking down information. But perhaps this will be. So when do we get off of the remediation and then onto something that's going to work? So that's what I mean by remediated weaknesses. And if you look at reports, if you look at your own reports, if you got them, there'll be a big section on presenting problems, and then on the bottom there's a little area for strengths. And what we need to do is we need to flip that around 180 degrees and start out with presenting strengths. And then there are some challenges that we do need to overcome. Autism does bring its set of challenges. How many of you agree that autism brings significant challenges? Yeah. If it didn't, why would we be here trying to figure it out? So we do have to work on those. We do have to address those issues, but at the same time, we also need to be cognizant of the strengths. And Amy had her hand up and down.
I'm just going to say that although I do think autism brings challenges, I think it's the way people in the world react to others having autism, to us having autism, that creates many challenges. more than autism in and of itself.
That's true.
Yeah, it's a societal thing.
Not
Yeah.
understanding.
It's societal ableism, basically, which is because society thinks that they want us to conform to something so hard and so desperately that sometimes it's hard for us to pass for that condition that they want us to pass for.
Yeah, and speaking of pass, I'll get to you in a minute.
Yeah.
Is the problem and the challenge that we face is that all of us here who are on the spectrum, how many people here are comfortable identifying that they're autistic?
But now I just say, just get away from me. All that.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So we're comfortable with saying that we're autistic, and what happens is that many of us, we pass for normal, for lack of better terminology. Everybody thinks that we're like everybody else until we run smack into something that addresses one of our challenges, and then people stop looking at us funny. And as a matter of fact, that creates even more stigma than what are known as visible disabilities. So someone who looks different, moves differently, right away it's seen. There'll be a certain amount of stigma that's applied to that right away anyways. What about those of us who look like everybody else? So how many people here look autistic? Yeah, we look like everybody else, except for those of us on the autism spectrum, that we seem to have some sort of body radars, can seek each other out. But other than that, we look like everybody else, and it causes big problems when we smack up against something that challenges us, because then people start asking a lot of questions. So reframing how we take a look at autism, subscribing to what I call the 3 A's of autism. And what are those 3 A's? Well, the first A,
Appreciation. Well, I did it in first.
yeah, you got it upside down, but anyway, so.
Awareness,
Yeah,
acceptance, appreciation.
okay, awareness, acceptance, and appreciation. So those are the 3 A's of autism. So we start with awareness. And awareness is what we've been working on for the past generation. And we've gotten to a point where most people have heard the word autism. Most people have some idea of what it is, even if it's incorrect. If they think every autistic person is like Rain Man, but at least they got some idea of what it is. And we're getting better at recognizing it, whether we're employers, educators, parents, medical professionals, and more autistic people as well, especially with adult diagnoses, where often an adult on the spectrum will do their own research. Why are things so different for me? Why are things so difficult?
Yeah, the microphone keeps cutting out.
Oh, that's really awful. Maybe we need that tech person again. Yeah, now you can hear it. Maybe it needs to be kind of jiggled every few minutes. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, that's better. Awareness. We're pretty good at that. Recognizing it. Oh, and as I was saying, autistic adults, many of us in a desperate search trying to figure out what's going on, we hook into something, usually online, but it might be some other means. Oh yeah, that sounds like me. And a sort of self-diagnosis occurs. Then you go out and you get that verified or validated by a professional, maybe someone in Spectrum Services and somewhere. And indeed, we find out that that's what it is. So awareness is pretty good.
You know, I like your kindness. You seem to have a warm, gentle way about it. It's all very nice, Dr. Shore. But the world outside these 4 walls doesn't work on those terms. At the college I went to, people knew you needed a lab experiment done. They would sabotage it if it meant a 10th of a grade point average higher for them. Books would be sabotaged if pages ripped out when they needed books for reports at Cornell. That's where I went to school. The suicide rate there was 9 people a year. It's still that way. It has a population base of 20,000 people. People there know it's a cutthroat, dog-eat-dog world. That's the way it is. There are plenty of corporations stuck with vicious bosses. I had them too. That's the way it is. So you're saying,
That's
oh
right.
yes, you're saying reframe your negatives into positive things, but the world doesn't care to look at it that way. The world will be, but that's the way the world is. There's no such place as a kind island of warmth and kindness. You know, like Dr. Shore's kindness is very nice, but that stops the minute you walk out that door. I mean, I like some strategies.
Hold on a second. There's still a lot of challenges, there's a lot of people, there's a cutthroat world, and what we need to do is we need to keep talking about this, we need to keep showing and increasing those islands of awareness. So as I think about some employers, such as SAP, that actively seeks autistic individuals for their employees, and they wanted to get it to a point where 1% of their employees are autistic. And there's other organizations such as Microsoft, Google, and so on who are actively looking for autistic individuals. So we got these little islands of kindness, awareness, and appreciation of autistic people, and we've got to keep them growing, is what it is. And certainly there are places where that's not happening, and we need to slowly show the world, organization by organization, company by company, that we have a lot to contribute. So it's a process, it's definitely a process. So there's that awareness piece that I was talking about, and then we move on to acceptance.
I just wanted to point out that there's a misunderstanding on most people's part that most jobs are created by large companies. Most jobs in the United States are created by smaller, relatively small companies, and those are probably the companies that are harder to reach as far as the owners and the people who run managers to reach as far as helping people with Asperger's or autism find accommodating jobs.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that is, here I'm talking about large companies. It's true. While we're on that subject, I mentioned an awful lot of IT companies. And one question I have is, it's great to talk about all of this IT geekerism, and it sells really well, and it's great to write about, but not all of us are IT geeks. As a matter of fact, not even a majority of us are. Not even that large a group of us are. But it's a big enough group that people can latch onto it and look for it and identify it, and it's something that publicizes really, really well. So one question that I have is, well, what about everybody else? What about those of us who are not IT geeks? And then what about those of us who maybe need more supports than what we find in a company such as SAP or others, some of the big name companies? And you have your hand up.
Just so the back of the room could hear, could you restate questions that are being asked?
Oh, that's a good idea, yeah.
Please.
All right. All right, so that's getting back to acceptance. What is acceptance? Acceptance is being aware of those characteristics and working with the characteristics, as opposed to trying to change us into what society considers as normal, for lack of better terminology. So what are some of the characteristics? Being detail-oriented, for example. Some of us having difficulty with the big picture. Instead of trying to change us into big picture people, and the world would be boring if everybody was a big picture type of person. So we need detail-oriented people. So we say, all right, that's an area of strength for autistic individuals. Let's work with it. Let's work with it to the max. And so that way, we're working with the characteristics. Acceptance is not saying, Jason's autistic and kind of let him be that way. We're not going to help him out, just let him be. That's a weird sort of denial of something. But we need to work with those characteristics. And sure, there's going to be challenges, so we have to work with those challenges as well. And one of the key indicators that someone or an organization is moving from the awareness to the acceptance stage is that you hear a lot less of doing things to autistic people and working with. So it's from the to the with. So when we get to the with, then we're moving towards acceptance. And then there's the pinnacle, which is appreciation. And that is valuing autistic people for the contributions we can make to society. And that's what I'm talking about with the employers I mentioned, of actively seeking autistic individuals to be their employees. And these are 3 stages that I see people going through, I see organizations going through, sometimes even entire countries going through these stages. And everybody gets through this, whether it's an autistic individual, whether it's a parent, who may often start out at the awareness stage, where once there's a diagnosis, there's this huge gathering of information, and nobody's done it before, but through sheer will and determination, these parents are going to cure or eliminate this autism thing that's horribly affecting their child. And then often during the transition years, the parents may begin to realize, well, this autism thing is here to stay, and there are some things we can do with it. We can work with this autism. That's the acceptance. And then moving on to appreciation, well, there's some really cool things about it, and there are things that we can contribute to society. So my question to you is, what steps will you take to climb these stairs, the 3 A's? Whether it's for yourself, whether it's for somebody you know, what can we do to flip things around, and instead of looking at them as deficits, find ways to consider them as strengths. So what brings me here to talk to you about employment? Let's take a look. Well, there I am at 24 hours of age, where my wife says I look like an egg. Yeah. Maybe it comes from eating too many eggs. And then in 18 months, like what happens to about 30% of us, the regressive autism bomb exploded. Loss of functional communication, meltdowns, withdrawal from the environment, and in brief, I became a pretty severely affected autistic child. And there was so little known about autism in those days. What do we do with autism? Where does it come from? So on that note, let us sing to the tune of Where, oh Where Has This Little Dog Gone? Ready, go. Where, oh where did this autism come from? Oh where can it be? More from the back. Where mysteries come and eye contact cut short. More from Jason. Oh where can it be from? I think with a little work on intonation and singing together, we'll be ready for the summer concert. It is hard, yes.
The lyrics at the same time.
It is, yeah, it's multitasking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is something that can be challenging for us.
Mm-hmm.
So do we take Jason and say, we're going to do what we can, and we're going to put all our effort into making Jason a multitasker? Or are we going to say, well, multitasking may not be his strength, but he seems awfully good at detail and focusing on one thing at a time, and we're going to find ways to work on that. And that's the transition from doing things to working with.
I've been oriented to a lot of jobs that are related to finance or back office work, and a lot of the positions within this job description it says it needs multitasking or like fast pace or do well under pressure, which is all things that I'm not good at.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, should I take that literally and just not apply for those jobs, or should I apply and if they have an interview, then will I disclose to them at that point, or what would I do?
Well, it starts with the job description. If you're familiar with the field, and if you know enough about the field to realize that, well, maybe I don't have to take that so literally, and there may be positions where I can really just get down and focus on particular details,
Mike,
Oh,
you're not talking into it, I think.
yeah, this mic is horribly placed.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I feel like I need to kind of climb up and talk into this foolishness. Well, this sort of works too. All right, so if that's the case, then maybe apply. You go in the interview. And that's when you find out just how multitasking, fast-paced, busy, all those things that maybe we find challenging it is. And if it's too much in that direction, then you basically say thanks but no thanks.
So we're supposed to ask them, like, because that doesn't look good for an interview. Well, the job description says fast-paced, multitasking. How much is it actually involved in that? I mean, I can't ask that. That's not.
You can't ask that, but you can go at it another way. And could you tell me what a typical day at the office looks like? And then they'll describe it out to you. And then from that description, you can determine for yourself, this is for me, or it's not for me. So that can be a way to go about it. You can't, much as we'd like to, especially with us detail-oriented folks, we cannot ask the recruiter, the interviewer, what percentage of this job is fast-paced? What percentage of it involves multitasking? If the multitasking quotient goes above 20%, then I can't take the job. But if it's below 20%, this is what we'd love to say and we'd love to do, and it would work well for us because we're so detail-oriented, but we can't ask questions like that. It's just not going to work. Unless the recruiter is autistic. Then maybe we could get it to work. So that's a good question. You have to do a little bit of sleuthing. And unfortunately, a lot of job descriptions kind of play it out that you kind of have to be able to do everything all at once, immediately the moment you step into the door. But that's often not the case. So you have to dig in a little bit deeper and gather your information and put it together on your own. So anyways, back to my situation. The autism bomb thing explodes. The parents have no idea what to do. People looking for causes autism. Best minds believe that it starts with genetics. I think there's a lot to be said for genetics. As I meet autistic people, I see characteristics in their family members. I remember meeting the dad of the first child I worked with. I said, "Hey Dad, I think you're autistic." Dad didn't like that. Well, then I found out that Dad didn't eat solid foods until he was 9.5. I also found out Dad had a negative autism diagnosis. So what I mean by that is that his family took him to doctors a month, visiting various doctors. They felt something was going on. And the result was a letter: "Dear Mom and Dad, your child cannot be autistic because he's talking." So clearly Amy isn't autistic because she talks. Jason, do you talk? No, you can't be autistic. And I can't be autistic either because I talk. But that was then. Now we know a lot more. Now we know that that's something that we often refer to as Asperger syndrome. Dad now realizes that he's either autistic or he's pretty close to being on the spectrum. He is what my friend Jerry Newport would cover aphid.
Cover what?
Aphid.
Isn't that like a little...
A little green bug?
Yeah.
Well, it's an acronym. And autism is full of alphabet soup. And what aphid stands for is autistic parent heavily in denial. You may know some. And that's the genetic piece. If we look at the science for the genetic piece, that will tell us that autism is scattered over 1,000 genes, 1,006, I think. So you might as well just diagnose the person as being human.
Exactly.
So that's where the science takes us for the genetics. And then perhaps there's an interaction with something in the environment, the two come together, and we have autism. However, we know a lot more about what to do with autism. We know what to do with it, not to do to, but to do with, to work with autism and appreciate those characteristics. So Dad, who's a recovered aphid, and he's recovered because now he understands that he's autistic or pretty close to the spectrum, he uses his strengths too. How many of you seen autistic people do this with bright, shiny objects? Yeah. How many of us still do? Well, this guy still does it too, and he's a very successful coin dealer. Talk about using strengths, and that's how he makes a living. So, anyways, back to my story. It took my parents a year to find a place for diagnosis, and when they did, the doctor said they had never seen a child who was so sick, and they recommended institutionalization. Fortunately, my parents, like we see so many parents today, they advocated on my behalf, and they convinced the school to take me in about a year. And it was during that year that my parents implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. And this was a program that emphasized music, movement, sensory integration, narration, and imitation. And that's just today's terminology. In those days, those concepts didn't even exist. So it was really just parents trying to figure out how to reach their kid. So what did they do? Well, first they tried to get me to imitate them. So how many of you have used imitation in trying to teach somebody something? Yeah, it's a time-honored educational approach. Parents do it all the time, therapists, friends, whatever. This is how you do it. Now you do it. It's an apprenticeship model too. But many of us, especially when young, we may be at a point where we can't imitate. Maybe it has to do with a lack of mirror neurons, but whatever it is, that's what happens. So my parents flipped it around and they imitated me. So whether it was flapping or making noises, that's what they did. And in doing so, I became aware of them in my environment. And then they were able to move me along. And I believe the key implication is that before you do any good work with an autistic person, you have to develop a trusting relationship first. And that goes for the workplace too. That goes for the supervisors I talk to when I do trainings at companies. You've got to develop that trusting relationship first, then you can move on. And I find that the people most successful at being with autistic people are those who develop the relationship first, build the connection, build the bond, then you move on. Yeah.
I just want to understand what you meant by that when your parents imitated you, that that an autistic person has to develop a what is it? I forgot what you said. Awareness about themselves or something like that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That you really how silly they're acting, or that's what I thought, but I don't think that's what that.
All right. Well, for example, try it sometime. You got an autistic person, child, adult, whatever. Maybe they're maybe they're flapping, engaging in some sort of activity, something that is so often referred to as non-functional, but it does have function for that person, and do the same thing. And one common response is they won't want you to do it, they won't like it. And even that's a connection. You're not going to keep doing it, but you build that connection, then you move on. Sometimes you'll get a look from them as if to say, what do you think you're doing? And that's a connection too. And then you build from that. So it's a building block. Again, it's an acceptance thing. This is how this person is acting, communicating now. Let's use it and then move on. So for example, let us suppose we have an individual who's pretty significantly affected. And I say that on purpose. I don't want to use the terms high and low functioning because they way overgeneralize things and put people into boxes.
I use the word impairment because I know I have impairments.
Yeah, you could use that, yeah. Yeah, it's being honest about it. But I've seen all kinds of situations where someone was classified as one,
Yes,
but it just doesn't fit.
exactly. I don't use those function labels.
That you could be high or low functioning in a particular task.
Yes.
Like I'm very low functioning in noisy bars. I'm also very low functioning on Twitter.
Yeah.
So you can be high or low functioning in particular aspects.
I'm more high functioning on Instagram.
Okay, whatever, yeah.
The other ones
Facebook,
are
whatever.
I try to keep up on the other two, but it's hard.
I know people who have ridiculous IQ scores. 160, 200, well, that's just a guess because IQ scores don't go that high. But at the same time, there's such challenges in sensory issues, social interaction, that they're just not going to find employment the way we think about finding and keeping a job. So what does that high functioning label mean?
Yeah, what? It doesn't mean anything.
Right. And then I know people who have the other one, the low functioning label, with IQs measured at room temperature or even freezing temperatures. But somehow they're writing articles and they're traveling and presenting and moving around. So what does that figure mean? So that's what I mean by the difficulties with high and low functioning. As a matter of fact, talking about autism that way is a low functioning way of talking about autism. So working with the characteristics, joining the person, such as with the individual who has a fascination in, let's say balls. So you got this person, maybe it's a young child, maybe it's somebody Jason's age, maybe it's an older person, and they've got this fascination with this object. It could be balls, could be cameras, whatever it is. So in this case, it's balls. And what it is if this person is in the same room as a ball, they're going to get attracted to it and they're going to throw it. And this person, if there's a ball in the room, it could be in a drawer that's closed, somehow he finds it, takes it out, and he throws it. It's just what he has to do. If you try to stop him, well, you know what's going to happen. So if we think about a more typical way of working with this individual, we've just identified this ball as a very powerful reinforcer. And you got something to say.
Yeah, an actual real life thing that happened is, I forgot his last name, Darius, something or other.
Yeah.
With the MTA and everything. Like, they keep on saying to prison and whatever it is that he's doing it, going to court. Like, but they're not addressing the reason why he's doing it and trying to redirect him in the right way.
Yeah, we'll get to Darius in a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're thinking about him because he's going to show up in a later slide. So that's good. So anyway, back to this simple example with balls. So the behavioral consultant has determined that this is a powerful reinforcer, and let's get this person to do this to work for that. But the efforts have failed. So that's doing things to this person. We're aware of it. Is there a way to work with the person? Is there a way to work with his interest in this object? And what I might do in such a situation is that instead of being the taker away of balls, I'll become the provider of them. I'll come in with a bag or a sack of balls, dozens of them. And I'll just start out by saying, here, and throw it. Here, throw it. So I'm already beginning to build a relationship with Luke. And I want him to look at me. Maybe I'll present it over here. And he'll look at me, he'll grab it, and he'll throw it. Now that I've built this relationship, and I'm not here to take them away, but I'm here to provide them, let's start working with what exists. And that's an example of the acceptance. It's not saying, well, if we take balls away from Luke, he's going to have a meltdown. Well, he's autistic, we just let him do that. That's that weird sort of denial acceptance thing. But, all right, you've got this thing for this object. I have no idea why, but it's just what you do. And now I'm going to work with it. And I'm going to use these objects in which to perhaps shape the behavior. Let's start throwing them in one particular place. stop throwing them into a basket. Let's count balls. Let's use it to develop communication. You know, come, I've got a ball. You come to me. Bring the ball to somebody else. Whatever it is. Categorizing, colors, whatever I want to teach, I'm going to start with that. And if I build this trusting relationship with these objects, maybe you'll trust me to start doing some other things. So that's an example of working with as opposed to doing things to.
There is actually a protocol in the Essential for Living for the pairing process that you're describing where, I mean, it's basically what you're saying, but it's more step by step. Where could the kid, you know, the first step is, does the kid take it from you or do you have to put it on the floor? Or does the kid, can the kid come to you, take one step, could the kid cross the room? So I just wanted to...
Right. Yeah, well, that's cool. So that's a more developmental way of looking at autism, as opposed to a more behavioral way. And which way is better? The one that works. That's the one that's better.
I know that non-speaking Midwest who owns their own popcorn company, and the parents set up where he owns the business and he helps them make the popcorn and he sells the popcorn all over the United States.
Yeah, I know.
Similar to the ball thing.
Right, I know another example. We'll get to in a moment, where there's this non-speaking, and I like that you said non-speaking and not non-verbal.
Yeah.
Because verbal interaction is a lot more than what we're doing and blabbering and talking to each other. And whereas non-speaking more accurately describes it. I know many autistic people who are just as smart as we are, and we only know that because either they figured it out or somebody else figured out that they need to be pointing at pictures or typing into a keypad of some sort, and then they can communicate. Paul Kotler is one such person who's, I don't know if he's getting or he already got his college degree, and he's going to be moving on to do some other things. He's just as smart as the rest of us. He could be presenting on material just like I'm doing. He's not going to talk to you like I'm talking to you. So it's going to be a little bit slower, and he's going to be pushing things into, pushing little pictures of things, and he'll communicate just as much as anybody else.
I think Sue Rubin too.
Yeah, Sue Rubin's another person like that, yeah.
What do you mean by developmental versus behavioral approach?
Okay, that's a good question. All approaches, be it floor time, be it applied behavior analysis, be it teach, daily life therapy, and a whole bunch of others, there's some element of changing behavior. So aren't they all behavioral? But these approaches are categorized by their theory. And that's how you determine whether an approach is behavioral or developmental. So if we look at the behavioral approaches, applied behavior analysis, a good part of teach, and a number of others, the idea is that we can modify behaviors, change behaviors by modifying the environment and using a system of operant conditioning, so a system of rewards and punishments. Although we're getting a little bit less on the punishments, so it's mostly rewards or reinforcers and ignoring undesired behaviors. So that's a behavioral way of looking at changing actions, changing behavior. Developmental approaches take a look at where is the person developmentally. And that's when we start hearing, for example, I've got this 10-year-old Sam over here, but developmentally he seems to be age 3. And if that's the case, what would we expect from a 3-year-old? Even though he's in a 10-year-old body, developmentally he's age 3, and let's start from there. And that's what the developmental approaches are about. So we're talking about the work of Vygotsky, Piaget. The people like those look at development. And again, which one is better? The one that works. Yeah, that's right. And actually, there's a lot of controversy about that too, with practitioners of various approaches trying to prove theirs is the best. But really all we can say is that a particular approach or approaches may be the best for that particular person. And it's like employment too. Not all of us are IT geeks. Not all of us belong at Microsoft or SAP, but we belong in other areas. So anyways, getting back to the popcorn maker, there's also the laundry folder. I know of a person in Florida who is non-speaking. He's got a lot of challenges, but one thing he really likes is to fold laundry when it's just come out of the dryer. So there's probably a sensory aspect to that. And he likes how everything's lined up neatly when they're folded up. How many of you would like someone to fold your laundry? So he will be very happy to fold your laundry. You're going to have to ship it to Florida and he'll ship it back, and you're going to have to pay him too, because that's his job. So there is employment for us all over the spectrum. Yeah.
I know one person I met, he's not really non-speaking, but he's semi non-speaking, and I met him a few years ago, and he liked to, he'd give him clothing, when he sees clothing, he'll just grab it and tear it from the seams. He liked to hear the seams of the clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something that we can do with that. Like the person I know who would love to do nothing more than find a bottle on the street, pick it up and smash it, and have it break into a million pieces. And so eventually what they did is they looked at that behavior. We don't know why he likes it. There must be a sensory aspect to it. He likes to do it. Can't exactly explain it. But at this time he works in a recycling plant. And he takes bottles and he throws them in the compactor recycling bin, whatever it is. And they make all this lovely smashing, breaking glass sound when he throws them. And he's happy doing that. Probably bore the daylights out of most of us, but he likes it, and so that's a meaningful job for him.
This like concept actually goes back thousands of years. I believe this is in the Talmud, where it says that if someone has an affinity for like blood, and you think maybe he'll be a murderer or whatever, redirect him to be a butcher.
Yeah, that's right.
Then he gets that need met in the proper framework.
Right. So there's a lot to be said for that. There is a need. It's going to be met in one way or another. So let's work with it. And whether it's someone who likes blood, for example, someone who likes breaking bottles, someone who likes spraying water at high pressure, someone who likes geeking into computers, whatever it is, let's work with it. Maybe we have to shape it a little bit, but let's work with it. That need is going to be met, whether you like it or not. So let's find a way that we can be successful in meeting that need. So back to my situation. So my parents implement this, what we would today call a more developmental type of approach, and speech begins to return at age 4. So I believe that we have the technology, we have the wherewithal, we have the know-how, so that instead of looking at the closed door of disability, disorder, and deficit, we can look at the open door of ability. And rather than autism being a bomb, autism becomes da bomb. And we see autism becoming da bomb whenever we're successful in matching up the interests, the strengths, and the abilities of that individual in order to be successful in employment. And this is what we need to be looking for. We need to be working with autism as opposed to trying to make the autistic person be somebody that we're not. So at age 4, I discovered the wonderful world of watch motors. So, like you said something about watches. I was found taking apart a watch with a sharp knife. And I pop open the back, I take out the motor, I disassemble that, put that back together again, and the watch still worked, and there weren't any pieces left over. So, incredible fine motor control to take apart a watch. But then where does that motor control go when it comes to penmanship? So that's always an interesting question to ask your favorite occupational therapist. Any OTs here?
But no one really writes anymore anyways.
Well, there's less and less of that. That's right. But it is interesting because writing takes fine motor control, and taking apart a watch, especially without the proper tools, that takes even more fine motor control. So it's the type of motor control. There's something different there which is interesting to think about. I entered the school that initially rejected me. I got reevaluated. Instead of being considered as psychotic, I got upgraded to neurotic, so things are moving up a little bit. So my parents noticed this, and instead of looking at the closed door of disability, they considered the open door of ability, and soon provided all kinds of other devices to take apart and put back together again.
A bomb disposal person.
Say that again?
Bomb disposal person.
Yeah, could be, yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because what we can be doing is we can be thinking about future possibilities for areas of study or employment, even at such a young age. We can always be looking for the strengths, the interests, the abilities, and maybe this could translate to being a watch repairman, a bomb
disposal,
bomb disposal type person. I think there's a fancier word for that, but I know what you're talking about, where you disarm bombs before they explode. It's kind of a dangerous thing to do. But something like that, working in some sort of detailed situation and taking apart watches, that suggests possibilities. It could be useful later on. Doesn't mean that a person's life trajectory will be planned at age 4, but we can start moving in that direction. Start thinking of this as possibilities. And at this time, it might have looked like, well, maybe a watchmaker, repairman. There's still need for a lot of supports in terms of independent living as an adult, communication. But at least this is something that our kid could do. Let's go with it. So as we think about employment, what do we do to prepare for employment success? Well, it starts with jobs around the house. We call them chores. And chores are pretty similar to employment. And why is that? Because there's repetition, efficiency, and responsibility. You've got to do them, whether you like it or not. You've got to do them on a regular basis. And if the autistic person can't accomplish the entire chore, well, let's break it up into pieces. Teach those pieces, and then glue those pieces back together again. And that sets the stage. And brings us to the next step, finding kid-sized jobs. So by middle school, by high school, it's good to be doing a job out of the house. Paperboy used to be a really good job, but papers now seem to be flung out of car windows, so you get them electronically. That was a good business, a miniature kid-sized business that was easy to handle. There was nothing better than when there was a snow day, because then I could go out and shovel people's driveways and come out with $50 at the end of the day. That was a long time ago. $50 really meant something. Cutting lawns in the summer. That's another example. Although that got cut short because I was allergic to grass. Hay fever.
You also live in the city where there's like no lawns here.
Yeah, well, it depends where you live too. If you're living in Manhattan, there's not much in the way of lawns. There's not much to shovel. So you find other things. Hopefully something that relates to an interest. Yes.
So you alluded to something that's really important when you said $50 used to mean something.
Yeah.
And what you alluded to is the fact that wages for manual labor have dropped precipitously in this country because of globalization and other forces. I mean, especially since 1972.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is my area, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. But we know that people can't live on minimum wage jobs anymore because housing, education, and medical care outpace the cost of. So what, like, since this is a really big issue for everyone, and especially for people in the disability world, do you have thoughts on how we could affect that politically? Because the fact that $50 doesn't mean very much anymore, that's a big problem you pointed out, Dr. Shore. That's a big problem.
Oh, it is, yeah, it's
Can you
huge.
summarize it for the people that didn't hear it in the back?
One more time.
No, you summarize, but they can't.
You want me to talk loud or? should I
Yeah, talk
summarize?
loud, yeah.
I'll talk loud, can you hear me? Yeah.
All
Okay,
right.
so since
Teacher voice.
1972, real wages for working people have dropped precipitously. At the same time, the cost of real estate, housing, basically, education, and medical care have exponentially increased. They've grown phenomenally. So basically, you can't live on minimum wage well anymore.
No.
And so it's a big problem for, especially for folks like ourselves who have, I mean, I present like I'm like on top of the world, but I'm as autistic as the next person. You know, self-diagnosis. You just took a million years for me to be able to do the thing I'm doing right now. But so my concern is like, how can we as a community of interest do things about that? The fact that basically like wealth inequality is ruining our options.
Yeah, it is. With the ever-increasing divide between the haves and the have-nots, that requires a lot of political action. I'd refer you to an expert in that area. That's not an area that I'm that familiar with, talking with legislators and whatnot. I've done it, and I've done it in terms of education, and what I tell them is that you can either pay a lot now for early intervention and education, or you can pay a heck of a lot later when you have someone who's not at their functioning to full capacity. And so you're getting at that kind of issue. And that is a big issue that needs to be addressed. We could probably do a whole workshop on that one. Maybe you could lead it.
The $50 workshop, we'll do it together.
Okay, we'll do it together.
Here's $50.
Yeah.
What'll we get you now?
Yeah, collaboration, that always works.
I just wanted to say that those examples of physical labor you're talking about was for a teenager, not necessarily meant for an adult who needs to support a family or himself on, him or herself.
Oh, well, that too.
And then also that you can take those skills and abilities that the person developed doing that into higher, higher pay, higher skilled work. You know, the person that just say stuff low and lawns necessarily, they can maybe do higher level landscaping.
Right, so that's why this is the preparation stage. And so those manual labor-ish type things, with the addition of now customer service, because you're getting paid for it, can prepare you for things later on. So at age 8, I started becoming interested in bicycles. Fascinated by it. Maybe it had to do with the spinning parts, whatever it was. There was nothing better than turning the bike upside down and spinning the pedals and getting the back wheel to go as fast as it could. And I got it to a point where I could take a bicycle apart down to the ball bearings and then get that back together again. So if we look at my situation at that point, maybe it would have looked like that I'd be a watch repairman. I should say a bicycle mechanic. And that's actually what I did. So starting in probably about age 10 or so, when I had my paper route, I let my customers know that I could fix their bicycles too, and sometimes they'd give me their bicycle, and I'd fix their bicycle, and that would be a way to earn money. And then finally getting a job at a bicycle shop. So what works? What doesn't work? Well, here's my first, I guess, formal job. We'd work a number of hours and get a paycheck at the end of a week or two. It was in a busy restaurant. Sensory overload, it just didn't work. And just like with anybody else, if something's not working, sometimes you just have to do something else. And I knew I had to find that something else. So what I did is I got on my bicycle that I built from the ground up, made the rounds of all the shops in the area. This was up in Boston. I'd find the manager of the shop, and nerd into my bicycle with the manager. And then after a period of time, I'd ask him for a job. So on the 12th time, I finally did get a job, fixing bicycles. So rather than looking at that closed door, turning away from the closed door of disorder, deficit, disability, I looked at the open door of what did work. And now I could regulate my sensory input, where I could fix bicycles in the back, or if somebody walked into the shop, I could go to the front and perseverate on bicycles with the poor person who walked in. I think they called it selling bicycles.
Is that drawing of you at that time?
So is that
A drawing of you?
No, it's just something I found on found out through Google Images. So fixing bicycles, that's pretty much what I did, and it was a great job. So now we look at my trajectory. Communication is pretty good, and if I had gone in that direction, and actually I did take it as far as managing bicycle shops. Maybe I would have eventually owned a bike shop, and that would have been a very good thing to do. I would have enjoyed it, and had things gone differently, then maybe that's exactly what I would have done. So it's going with what works. And I also realize now that I used what is known as the portfolio method of looking for a job. That is getting my work in front of the person who has the ability to hire. And my bicycle was my portfolio. I didn't realize it. But as we also think about it, how do we typically get a job? We apply for the job, we walk in, and the interview is a big part of it. Interviewing is one of the most typical social things a person can do. Maybe dating is more than that, but that's about it. And interview can be hard for us. There's so many rules for interviewing. We can learn those rules.
Shaking hands.
So shaking hands, yeah. So, Luke, it's a pleasure to meet you.
You too.
And I look forward to talking to you about the job. So what were some of the nonverbals? Eye contact? What else?
Well, there was like a seminar where they said that to kind of match the body language and like the tone that sent, well, the tone I just added, but I'm saying like.
Sure, yeah, you're right, yeah.
Super calm, you shouldn't be like, ah.
Yeah, right. So even those simple things, shaking the hands. How many times do you pump a person's hand anyways?
Like,
One more. 3. Everybody knows that.
No.
It comes automatically. 3 is the most common number. I've had someone hold on to your hand and not let go. That's weird. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But it happens to be 3. If you deviate from that, subconsciously, well, that's kind of a difference. Do we want that person? It works better if you shake somebody else's. Shake Jason's hand.
sorry.
Okay. Then you can shake, well, whatever.
You can shake mine.
There you go.
Sorry.
I guess I've never done that.
Yeah, well, anyway, that's the number that seems to pop up the most. And most people who aren't on the autism spectrum just kind of know this. It just kind of happens. Now the thing is, we can learn this rule. 1, 2, 3. So as I'm thinking about eye contact, as I'm thinking about shaking hands, 1, 2, 3, how much is left for actually talking about the job? And what about that interview? Into the office, who sits down first? The interviewer. Then you sit down. So Luke says to me, hold on just a minute. Why don't you have a seat? I gotta get something out of my filing cabinet. I'll be right with you. And then I say, oh, wait a minute. I know the rule. And the rule is that you have to sit down first. So I'll just be happy to stand here and I'll watch you as you get stuff out of your filing cabinet. So that person's not going to get the job. The portfolio method. Focus was on the bike. We were talking about something that I knew about. Didn't have to look at the interviewer. Didn't have to shake his hand. Then by the time I asked him for a job, he knew that I knew my way around a bicycle, and I was able to find employment in that way.
I recently went through a 2-week like self-exploration process,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm waiting to get the results of it. But one thing I realized is, try to, let's say, different types of jobs, I would consider to find someone that does that type of job and meet with him for like half an hour, talk to him about the process.
Right.
If I find that that's something I want to pursue, ask him if I can shadow them for like a half a day or a day, and then I built. Not only do I actually figure out if that's what I want to do, because on paper everything looks that's what I want to do, but how do I actually know if something I want to get involved with? But also it's a way for me to develop a relationship with these people, for them to see maybe that they actually want to consider hiring me, even without me asking that.
Yeah, that's right. And so what that's called is, it starts out with informational interviews. That's exactly what it is. You're not interviewing somebody for a job, you're interviewing to find out more about that profession. And does it fit? And if it seems like it might fit, then you can take it a step further. Can I shadow you for half a day? Can I observe you for half a day? And if it still seems to fit, you go further in. So that can be a good way to find a job as well. Relationships are very important in terms of finding employment. It's a matter of getting the person who has the power to hire to like you. So in achieving employment success, it's important to match up characteristics with job attributes, with possible positions. I haven't read there, we talked about some sensory responses, responses to sensory stimulation. We can either say, well, someone who likes the way clothes feel when they come out of a dryer and folding them up, that's weird behavior. We really got to teach them something else so they can become employable. Or do we use that and find a way to appreciate this skill, to appreciate this interest in order to find employment? Someone, for example, who likes spraying water at high pressure. How many of you watered a garden or something, you put your finger over the end of the hose so it sprays a little bit further?
Yes.
So some people really get into that. And if you have someone who really gets into it, well, what opportunities exist for spraying water at high pressure?
A firefighter?
Being a firefighter is a really good one.
Car wash.
If the person has the communication ability to be a firefighter, has other abilities that go in that direction, sure, being a firefighter. If communication is a challenge, but they're somehow interested in firefighting and fire engines and all that type of stuff, maybe we could find a friendly firehouse where that person could help clean fire engines after a fire. How many of you have seen a dirty fire engine? So they're pretty rare, and that's just because they're on the way back from fighting a fire. The first thing they do when they get back is they clean up the truck. And if you get someone who's really into that, they'll probably be the best fire truck washer in the New York area, because that's something that they'd be really interested in. So looking at the different possibilities, matching them up. As a matter of fact, what's the difference between what I'm talking about here and taking those skills, matching them to employment situations, than we do with anybody else?
Sorry.
Yeah, it's the same thing. We do it for everybody. So we need to do it for autistic people as well. Now we may have to pay all kinds of noises. We may have to pay closer attention to specific aspects, maybe some more intense focus on areas of interest, but the concept is the same. Taking those characteristics and working with them as opposed to trying to change that individual.
All these jobs that you display, the possible positions, are low level relative positions in as far as pay wise and what you do with it.
That's right. So what I've listed here are positions for someone who perhaps needs more supports. Someone who needs more supports, someone who is not going to be working at SAP They're not going to be working at Google doing these
Or the
high-tech,
mayor's office.
geeky-ish stuff, or what?
The mayor's office.
Or at the mayor's office, but someone who perhaps has more challenges, because this is a whole area too that we need to address. Now, it's fine and well to talk about working at Google, to be doing geeky things with Ernst & Young accounting and things like that, but we need to expand and look at providing employment for more individuals. So a couple of other things to look at. So this was my college job. By the time I got to college, I had spent a number of years working in bicycle shops, managing bicycle shops, and I figured, well, why not fix them at college? And I went into business for myself. I plastered the campus with these signs. There were thousands of them all over the place, and people I know who I find out were at my university, UMass Amherst to be specific. I'll ask them if they remember these signs, and often they do. So that's how many there were. And what would happen is there are people who take down the number, they call me up on the phone, and I'd fix their bicycle. I made the rounds of the bike shops, decided that I should charge 2/3 whatever they charge. Not sure where I came up with that number, but that's what it was. And I could stay in my dorm room for half a Saturday and make $100. So up from the 50 up to 100. And that was a great way to make money. It was much more interesting than doing one of those work-study type jobs, being a security guard or something like that. And I remember actually talking to someone. They had given me several $1,000s in work-study money. And the job involved setting up stages for musical performances. So in other words, moving music stands and chairs on stage, taking them off, stacking them up, and so on. And I think a minimum wage, or paid pretty close to it. Anyway, it seemed to come out to like $4 an hour. And my response to that, I guess it was a very autistic response. And it was something like, why would I think they kept talking about how I'd be building skills for employment or something like that. And my response was, well, I think my stand moving ability is good enough for what I need it to be. I'm a musician, I play on stage. Don't need to learn more about moving chairs and stacking chairs. I've got plenty of experience in that. And by the way, why would I do something that only pays, whatever it was, $4 an hour, when I could stay in my dorm room fixing bicycles and make $100 for half a day? And it's much more interesting. So, anyways, it probably wasn't a nice thing to say, but that's what I said anyways. So there I was, fixing my bicycles in my dorm. Sometimes I'd have a number of bicycles in various stages of assembly in my room. I remember telling my sister about it, just geeking out over it, how cool it was to have so many bicycles in the dorm room, fixing them, various stages of repair. My sister said, "What about your roommate?" And my response was, well, all the bicycles and stuff are on my side of the room. And then she said, well, your roommate's a photographer, isn't he? Well, yeah. Well, what if your roommate had cameras and lenses and developing equipment and all kinds of stuff related to this on his side of the room? Wouldn't that bother you? And I said, no, it wouldn't bother me at all. I'd probably take them apart and put them back together again. Typical logic doesn't work with an atypical person. So finally she pulled rank and said, get the bikes out of the room. So I had to put them in the lounge, and that's where they lived. So as we think about employment, what's being done? What's being done now? What are some organizations and resources that are out there? Well, one resource starts from what they call the soft skills for employment. A colleague and I were asked by the Arc of Philadelphia, SAP, that was just outside of Philadelphia, to train these 24 autistic young adults who are interested in IT. The last thing we needed to do was to teach them how to do their job. They knew a lot more than we could ever hope to. But they were horribly either unemployed or underemployed and not working in the field. So we were asked to put together a 40-hour curriculum. And basically what we did is we took a standard work week, 9 to 5 or 9 to 4, and you get these 24 autistic people in a room. We thought the room might explode with so many autistic people in one place, but it didn't.
What level were they as far as functionality?
Their communication was good, and they had the ability, if they could learn these areas, all the other aspects of employment, then they would be okay with some limited support, continuing support in the organization. So we went through that. SAP was going to hire about half of them. They ended up hiring them all. And from what I know, 22 of them are still working. This was 4 years ago. So 4 years of work on this curriculum, and it has now become a neurodiversity in the workspace curriculum. So let's see if we can get a look at that. Oh, here it comes. Neurodiversity in the workplace. Why do I have it and you don't?
Can you get a better website name?
That was a horrible name. But the price is right. Oh, this is really weird. I can see it here.
Maybe jiggle your mouse.
My computer is really having a
different display.
It's having a problem with theory of mind.
No, I think if you press the control button and you press click on it at the same time.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
A lot
All
of times
right, let's try it again.
Or you can escape
Yeah,
the
this is weird because I'm
PowerPoint.
seeing two things at once. All right, there's another way to skin this proverbial
Oh, it's
cat.
working, I think it's gone.
I didn't ask them.
Oh, there we go. The neurodiversity in the workplace. And this is a 40-hour curriculum focusing on neurodiversity, hiring the neurodiverse employees, and it can also be used to train employers. And you can get this curriculum for the low price, only today, of $5,000. It's a bargain at twice the price. No, actually, it's open source. It's free. You can download it. So we decided, my colleague and I, along with the Arc of Philadelphia, felt that this is something that needs to be available to everybody. So you can go in and download it.
Is the name of this program again, sorry?
It's neurodiversity in the workplace curriculum. So it's got a really ugly URL because they have it up there for free. But that wiki space is going to close soon, so we need to find a new home for it. So eventually we'll find another home. Hopefully we'll have something that's a little bit easier to remember, and you'll be able to access it there.
WordPress has a free hosting thing.
All right, that's good to know. So maybe we'll end up there. Autism Speaks has expressed interest in putting it on their website, so maybe it will go there. Well, anyway, it's going to end up somewhere, and it'll be available for free. You can download the PowerPoints, the modules, there's workbooks, there's assessments, and all that fun stuff, which you then can use to increase the neurodiverse population in the workplace. So it's not just for autism, but it's for people who have various differences. So let's see if we can go back to the PowerPoint and continue on. All right, so there we go. So that's one example of a resource. There's the two protagonists who developed it. So the two of us teamed up together and put it all together. There's a number of modules, as I mentioned before, that cover these categories: PowerPoint presentations.
Who funded you guys to do this?
Who did?
Yeah, who funded you guys?
It was a big collaborative effort between, I think there were 5 or 6 organizations involved. There was SAP, who wanted the employers. There was ARC of Philadelphia, who found a grant to pay us to develop and deliver the curriculum. There was Voc Rehab, who identified the people who would fit into the program. There was the local community college that gave us the workspace to teach it, and I think there were some others. So it required a lot of interagency collaboration, which can be a challenge in its own. But if it can be done, that's really helpful.
Dr. Shore,
Yeah.
did you find the money or did the money find you? I'm curious.
Oh, that's a good question. The money found us. And again, it was through people you know. They always say in business, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it started out with my colleague, Robert Nassif. He was approached by the director of the Philadelphia ARC, who's now doing something else. But anyways, she asked him if he would do it, and his response was, well, you know, I'm a psychologist, I work on family issues and autism, I don't know if I want to do it. But she kept haranguing him, and he finally said, well, maybe I can get Stephen to help me out with this. If we can work together, then okay, I'll do it. And that's exactly what happened. He contacted me. Well, I'm not sure if I want to do it. All right, if you're going to do it, I'll work with you. We'll put it together. And that's where it came from.
So that's a model of how to find the work.
Yeah.
Become the who you are, or what you're good at, and somehow the money or the job may find you.
Yeah, there is an element to that.
Okay.
And that's what happens with my presentations. I do a lot of I'll get to you in a moment. I do a lot of presentations. I haven't even counted them, but it's probably like 50 or 70 a year. And I don't advertise. I have a website, but I guess that's soft advertising. But I don't send out email blasts to chapters of the ARC and ASA and whatnot looking to do presentations. But they contact me probably because they hear me at some other presentation and they think it's a good idea to bring me in. So it is a model. I haven't thought that much about how it works, but it seems to be working. Yes?
Something about, touching on what you said, and in general, a good networking device for job hunting, is that there's a common misconception that most jobs that people should apply online for jobs, when in fact, like 85% of jobs that people get are who you know or who you meet, not applying online. And this goes coincides a lot with what you're saying as far as like meeting people and networking as opposed to like just applying online.
Right, and networking, visual perception-wise, is just not going to happen. So what can we do to get that person as close to that kind of position as possible? And might there be a job at an airport that might work better? It gets them close to it. Someone who's fascinated with whatever it might be, Pokemon or whatever. Is there something about one of those characters? That will make a little bit more sense. So we got 2 more to go, and we got about 100. I guess it's 12 o'clock. We're all done. But anyways, let's do 2 more, and then the stuff we don't get to. Certainly, you're welcome to contact me, and put up my information. You're welcome to contact me and ask me those questions later, either the ones we don't get to now, or maybe questions that pop up later. As you're thinking about it, take down, take a picture of, copy it on the website. You can contact me through this website. And say that again?
Email address is on the website?
Yeah, it is. There'll be a link that says click to contact Stephen Shore. That's my website.
In the middle, the bed in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Autismasperger.net.
Autismasperger.net.
It's pronounced Pokemon.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Thanks. And if you lose all of this, look for my name and put the word autism, Stephen Shore, autism, and enough things will pop up where you can get back to the site. I also professor at Delphi University, so you can find me there. And you can look me up there as well. So on that note, I see we're a little bit over time. One more question, and then I know I got to get back to my university and teach class.
Kind of a question in regards to like an earlier point you made where at the very beginning of the application, you mentioned, I've heard recently people within the spectrum, they have their unemployment rate is a little high. I was curious to know, like, why do you think like the employment rate is as such? Like, is it because the employer doesn't understand the person that's under the spectrum, or do you think it's because the person on the spectrum just doesn't know how to behave themselves in the job or the interview? Or do you think it's so high and is there a way to like combat it?
Yeah, well, one thing to think about, and it's not necessarily the answer, but something to think about. Research has been done to determine what the most powerful factor is in terms of career success. And what they found is that once you have a basic knowledge of how to do the job, the most highly weighted variable is how well do you get along with others. So that's the social interaction piece. Autistic people, we socialize differently. I'm not going to say it's a disorder because it isn't, but you can say it's a different order of how we interact. And since we're still a minority, getting up to 2%, but still a big, small minority of the general population, it's a matter of what the general population expects. So what that suggests is getting back to that neurodiversity employment for neurodiverse people curriculum, is that we both need to meet halfway. So we can't put it all on the autistic person, especially if we're characterized with having difficulties with addressing change and dealing with typical social interaction. Why we expected to make all the accommodations. So meeting in the middle, learning more about working, being successful at a place of employment, but also on the other side, training the employers to better understand autism. And that we've got a long way to go with that. There's some employers that are doing it really well. With the internet, we're also got these weird disparities going on. So for example, I did a workshop for the Asperger Syndrome Support Network of Russia in Moscow. And they could sling the lingo of self-advocacy as well as we could. And why is that? Because they're reading it online. And they're interacting with us online. But when it comes time for them to go to their employer, to their professor, and to advocate for themselves, they're in the dark ages. So they're doing everything right, but the employer, the educators, and whatnot, society is not quite ready for it. So we've got Russia primarily getting to the awareness stage. We've got to get them to the acceptance stage. So anyways, it was great talking with you. We had a great conversation. Let's keep the work going.